You voted for it, I bought it. This is our long-term Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. We have now had it for about 2 months and 2,500 miles. Let's talk about what I like about the Outlander plug-in hybrid and what I would change if I were Mitsubishi working on a mid-cycle refresh. And of course, what you should know if you're considering the Outlander plug-in hybrid over any of the other plug-in hybrid competitors. First, there's the look. I think that this is a little bit more attractive up front than the Kia Sportage. I don't care for the Sportage's front-end design, but I do think that the RAV4 Prime is more attractive than the Outlander, as is the Nissan Rogue. And the Nissan Rogue is closely related to the body of the Outlander, but the plug-in hybrid system, that's unique to Mitsubishi. We of course have Outlander spelled out across the front a la Land Rover, and this kind of angular looking front end that I have grown to like a bit more than when I first saw it. The accent lights up top I think are definitely an attractive touch, and I've grown to like these sort of, I don't know, arachnid style headlights here with these lots of modules going on in those LED headlights. The first thing we should do is talk about the plug-in hybrid system because some elements of this plug-in hybrid are a bit controversial and some are misunderstood by even colleagues in the industry. Some folks out there that were at the same drive event that I was when we first drove this out in Tennessee were amazed by its fuel efficiency. They said, oh, we got 50-60 miles per gallon according to the instrument cluster display. Well, yes, if you consider the electricity completely free. That's what the display will tell you. You have a mixture of gasoline and electricity going on, it's going to say 50-60 miles per gallon. However, if you drive this as a regular hybrid without charging the battery, then we have somewhat controversial fuel economy, just 26 miles per gallon combined according to the EPA. And the EPA cycle is pretty generous to plug-in hybrids like this. Remember that the highway cycle has an average speed of about 48 miles an hour. Driving this at about 72 miles an hour, pretty level interstate travel, pretty constant speed, you'll average about 24 to 26 miles per gallon. That's because this hybrid system spends an awful lot of time in serial hybrid mode, especially at lower speeds and at higher speeds. Say at about 65 miles an hour, you should be getting about 26 miles per gallon because it can power the wheels directly from the gasoline engine over here, but at a wider variety of speeds and torque levels required, hill climbing, etc., it's going to decouple that and be a serial hybrid. That's just not as efficient as some of the competitive hybrid designs. Instead of focusing on hybrid mode efficiency, like we find in a RAV4 Prime hybrid, this system is more focused on being an all-wheel drive EV that has sort of a backup plan on board. We get 38 miles of electric range, and even though we don't get identical motors front and rear, the characteristics of the motors are very similar, and the car will really try and balance the power pretty equally front and rear over a wide mix of driving conditions. 248 horsepower total, and really until you hit that 248 horsepower peak, this system can send 50% power to the rear, 50% power to the front. So if you're looking for more of a mild off-roading plug-in hybrid, this is certainly going to be more capable than the RAV4 Prime. Not too far off where we see the mechanical all-wheel drive systems available in this segment though, the Tucson and the Sportage, both of those will get better hybrid mode fuel efficiency. And all of the competition will also be more efficient when operating as an electric vehicle. This gets 38 miles of range from a 20 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's about the same range that you'll get in a RAV4 Prime with a bigger battery. Bigger battery, of course, means that you're going to spend more charging it, and it's going to take longer to charge as well. On the other hand, because of this system's very design, the driving feel when it's in hybrid mode and when it's in EV mode is very, very similar, except that you will get slightly better 0 to 60 performance in hybrid mode because you'll get more power. Charging speeds and times are also something to keep in mind. Behind this door, we have a J1772 connector. There's an onboard 3.7 kilowatt charger. About the same speed that we find in a base RAV4 Prime, but remember, bigger battery pack. So 6.5 hours at a level 2 charger will get this from 0 to 100%. If I were Mitsubishi, I would definitely be focusing on fuel economy improvements for a future Outlander plug-in hybrid, and I would suggest installing a slightly faster level 2 charger. Behind this door, we have a regular J1772 port. There's an onboard 3.7 kilowatt charger. That's the same speed that we find in the base RAV4 Prime, but there are two things to keep in mind. The RAV4 Prime offers a 6.6 kilowatt charger, about double this charge speed, and the battery is smaller, so it won't take as long to charge, even at 3.7 kilowatts. This one's going to take about 6.5 hours to charge at 240 volts. That means that you will charge completely at the office. So you drive in the morning, it's going to be completely full if you have access to level 2 charging there. Ditto at home. But if you have access only to 120 volt charging, it's going to take 16 hours to completely charge the battery. So you'll only have half a charge if you're able to charge this at work, but only at 120 volts. On the other hand, this is one of only 2 plug-in hybrids that I can think of in North America that has a DC fast charge port, the other one being the new Range Rover plug-in hybrids. But this is not a CCS connector, the more common one that you'll find in America. Instead, this is a CHAdeMO charge plug. The DC charge connector means that you can get this battery to 80% in about 38 minutes. So if you go to the mall and there's a DC fast charge connector there, you can get a reasonable charge in that time. But if you wanted to take it completely to full, that's going to take well over an hour. The comfortable and attractive theme continues in the second row. We've done some road trips with neighbors, friends, family, etc. They all found the second row seats very comfortable. You can fold down the middle section to either get the cup holders or cargo pass-through from that back seat there. And I do like that the center shoulder belt comes out of the seat itself, not out of the ceiling. We also have the somewhat controversial tiny third row back there. Clearly, a great deal has been said about the Outlander and Outlander plug-in hybrid's third row. We do get less room in here than we get in the non-plug-in hybrid version. We lose some legroom because of where the battery is located. There's actually this big plastic thing right here that reduces some legroom ability, and headroom drops a little bit as well. You can see there's just no way for me to get comfortable back here at 6 feet tall. We have these absolutely enormous silly headrests back here. But I appreciate the fact that this has the third row available. It also does adjust for tilt, so you can actually recline it. That could make it a tiny bit more comfortable for some people. It can be very upright, but there's still no way I could get my way back to the headrest there. Still like it though. I still am happy that it has one in an emergency, but I wish it came out of the vehicle. If this was removable so you could get a bigger cargo area, that would be my preference. Some sort of quick latch mechanism where you could pull it out a la a minivan. That would be absolutely fantastic. But actually, as far as the existence of the third row, I'm oddly enough okay with it. What's cargo room like behind the third row? Well, as you'd expect, not overly generous. You can see I have a wire welder in there at the moment. So we can actually put a reasonable amount of cargo behind the third row if you needed to. Here is a better view of those enormous fold-up headrests. You can see those headrests are actually a little bit taller than the entire seat back cushion behind it. Flipping and folding that third row is a multi-step process. You can see the little diagram there. I found myself actually after having driven this for quite some time, that most of the time I just leave the third row seat folded in that manner. That gives you a sort of flattish area there and this deeper cargo well behind it. If you want a flat cargo area, you basically tumble that into the seat. The cargo area becomes flat, but it also becomes level with this opening, so you can't put things that are quite as tall inside. This is the roller style cargo cover. You can see you can locate it right there behind the third row, or you can put it in a somewhat unusual position, which would actually be right here, which is decently behind the second row. Mitsubishi likely mounted that cargo cover so far rearward because they wanted to give the third row seats that tiny window back there, which really does help it feel more roomy and more open than not having a window at all. But it also means that we have this rather unusual fabric section right there that you have to Velcro to the seat back. Here's what that looks like. There are actually some little Velcro sections on there. And if you want to cover your cargo completely, you have to kind of stick that to the rear seat back, and then it kind of flops around like that. I think the interior is a huge win for Mitsubishi. We have this large panoramic moonroof. We also have some really attractive interior colors. This model has the lightest interior color available, although this is not available in the fully loaded Outlander plug-in hybrid. You'd have to step down one notch for that. We have well-integrated sunshades back there in the rear doors, height-adjustable shoulder belts, and very attractive leather upholstery. This has the upgraded leather upholstery with the cross-hatching stitching right there. No ventilation, of course. Notice these aren't even perforated, but the seat design is very comfortable and I think very attractive as well. Moving over to the front doors, we have that same sort of two-tone thing going on there with more of that stitched upholstery there. Really elegant look to it. I also really like this very linear dashboard theme. On the downside, we have shiny black plastic, which is definitely going to get scratched up longer term. You'll notice that some of the plastics in here are already showing a little bit of very fine scratches. In the middle of the dashboard, we have an infotainment system that's basically been borrowed out of the Nissan lineup. It uses the same sort of software that we find in the average Nissan. The screen is nice and large, but it's not the largest in this segment. You will find larger screens in, say, the Tucson or the Sportage. Two big air vents down there, engine start stop button, tri-zone automatic climate control, so there's a rear climate control zone there. Pretty easy to use controls. Below the climate controls, we have two USB inputs that work with the infotainment system, a Qi wireless charging mat, and then that area of black plastic that I said has been getting a little bit scratched up, fine scratches there. Now, there are a lot of controls here on the center console. Let's talk about them. We have auto brake hold over here. This does turn itself off every time you power cycle the car. I think that's a little bit silly. I wish that stayed on. Up here, we have a button to change the EV mode operation only. So that's normal, hybrid, charge, or save. This is basically one pedal driving, although it does kind of look like a skyscraper, I don't know, with some sort of maypole thing going on there. We have a joystick style shifter, park, drive, and the enhanced engine braking back there. I'll talk a bit more about that because that's a little bit unusual in a bit. And then down here we have another sort of drive mode selector. This is your more typical one where we have normal, eco, power mode, tarmac mode, and then a few different off-road modes there. Those control traction control, stability control, where the power is going, which motor it's going to, etc. Behind that control knob, we have two big cup holders. These accommodate large takeout drinks very easily. We then have a padded center armrest, a really thickly padded center armrest actually. It's very comfortable. And then a somewhat smaller storage area than I would have expected inside. You'll notice there's a decent amount of dead area. Really, comfort is the big thing about this interior. The seats are very comfortable, the armrests are nice and soft and squishy, etc. And everything is very attractive in here. I like this steering wheel. It's a 4-spoke design. Paddles on the back. These are regenerative braking paddles. Attractive controls on the front. You may notice a lot of relationship to the Nissan Rogue in here. So very similar controls over here on the steering wheel. This also controls that multifunction LCD instrument cluster. And then we have the adaptive cruise control and additional safety controls over here. The full LCD cluster offers us two themes that are very similar to what we find in Nissan Rogue. I can change the meter view there, and then we get those wheels that move over to the side for an expanded view in the middle. We get things like our all-wheel drive readout, tire pressure, battery temperature, trip computer, etc., things like that. And if we go back to the trip computer here, here's what I was mentioning earlier. So you notice it says 65.3 miles per gallon, but over the last 2,100 miles, that's just that trip computer. If I click it again, we'll get the manual reset one. So basically, ever since we bought the car, 61.8 miles per gallon. But you should know that the gas tank has only been filled up twice. So most of that is on electricity. That should give you some indication of how much gasoline is consumed when it's operating in gasoline mode, which honestly, we're not doing that often. So really consider this more of an EV with a backup plan. Out on the road, the first thing I should talk about are, I guess, some of the peculiarities with the drive modes in this vehicle. It does not automatically start in EV mode. It will automatically start out in the auto mode, essentially. So if you want EV mode, you have to turn it on, hit the EV button, then it will go into EV priority mode. But there's something else you should know. If it's cold outside, and I mean maybe under 50 degrees, and the auto climate control was on before, set to say maybe 70, 72 degrees for the cabin temperature, it's actually going to turn on the gasoline engine right away. Even though this has a heat pump and it could heat the cabin with that heat pump, it chooses to turn on the gasoline engine in order to really help improve the cabin heating performance. There's a way around that. If you remember to turn off the automatic climate control before you turn it on, then you turn it on after the car has started and entered the EV mode, then it won't turn on the gasoline engine. That's a quirk that I really wish Mitsubishi would fix in a software update. Hopefully they're working on that. That is a little bit unusual, but there is a work around it. The other thing you'll notice is that unlike some plug-in hybrids, once the gasoline engine has started, it will run for a good long time, much longer than you might think before it will decide to turn off again. It certainly runs for longer than, say, the engine in a RAV4 Prime or the Tucson or the Sportage, etc., etc. So, for instance, the engine decided to turn on. It's actually nice and warm now. We're at the stoplight, going downhill even. We don't need much power. In fact, we're regenerating power. The engine is still on. If I want to turn it off, I have to, of course, pull over, that here, and then put it in park, and then turn the car off, turn the car back on, wait for it to boot up there, then I hit the EV button, then I'm in EV mode, there we go, and now we can take back off again in EV mode. So there are some complications to keep in mind. And you're going to notice that if you floor it. If you're in EV mode and you floor it, it's going to turn on the gasoline engine because it assumes you want all 248 horsepower. You can get pretty aggressive, and of course there's a little gauge over there to help you stay in EV mode. Also, if you're going uphill, up steeper hills, it's going to eventually turn off the EV mode. We have a gasoline engine on board, so just like most plug-in hybrids, the system is going to try and save battery life. It's not going to try and push things as far as motor overheating or battery overheating, etc. Why bother? Because we have the gasoline engine on board. This is one of the few vehicles that can stay in EV mode only, all the way from my office to home, which is a 36-mile journey. It can actually do that, but generally it won't, because you have to climb up the mountain climb, 2,200 feet. You have to climb up there really, really slowly in order to get this to stay in EV mode. It seems like the battery temperature is the limit that's exceeded there, and then it decides it's going to turn on the engine to just try and solve that particular problem. But on the opposite direction, absolutely no problem, stays in EV mode all the way to the office, around town, uphill, downhill, etc. This is a really solid feeling plug-in hybrid setup. Also on the quirky front, the way the regen paddles and that B mode work if the battery is too full. If the state of charge is over about 50% or so, and I pull on these paddles or put it into the B mode, it's actually going to turn on the gasoline engine. Now there is some logic to that. It may sound weird, but here's what's going on. When a battery like this is full, it can't accept much regen. And to give this a consistent regen feel, whether we're talking about the blended braking system, because this does have one, or the throttle liftoff regen, which is adjustable with these paddles, it uses the gasoline engine essentially to consume power. So it's regenerating power into the battery from the electric motor in the back and the electric motor up front, and then it uses the generator motor to actually spin the engine to consume that energy. That's quite logical. We see this also in vehicles like the Accord hybrid, the CR-V hybrid, etc. They do the exact same thing, as do Toyota hybrids. But with those vehicles, when those modes are engaged, generally speaking, they don't then continue burning gasoline. And in this vehicle, again, the gas engine is going to stay on for a decent amount of time until it heats the catalyst up, gets to operating temperature, then it's finally going to check out. If I then put the vehicle in EV mode, it's going to stay in EV mode, but even then, it may turn on the gasoline engine here and there. Really, the only way to prevent that is to start the vehicle in EV mode and then not exceed any of these parameters where it's actually going to turn on the gas engine. Back on the positive side of things, the Outlander is very comfortable. The seats are comfy, the cabin is quiet. Even when the gasoline engine turns on, it's relatively well hushed. It's actually a fairly small engine. It's actually revving up here now. Basically going at full bore, it's actually pretty quiet. A little bit quieter actually than I find the engine in any of the plug-in hybrid competition. Although again, it is going to use that engine a little bit more. On the other side of things, we have the general driving dynamics in the Outlander. Perhaps this is because of the third row and the increased payload that we find back there, but on broken pavement in the corners, the rear end can sort of get into an odd oscillation where it feels that the rear end is doing something different than the front. That definitely quiets down the more people you have in here, or if you have some heavy cargo in the back. I didn't notice that in the regular Outlander. It could just be the suspension system changes because of the added curb weight we find in the Outlander plug-in hybrid. So if you're after better driving dynamics, get the one without the plug-in hybrid. Also the RAV4 Prime, Tucson, etc. I think those all handle better in those terms. If we're talking about power to the rear and fun out on a different kind of road surface, whether you're out on mud, snow, ice, grass, etc., this is a lot of fun. At the launch event, Mitsubishi was letting us drive out on some muddy grass, and that was a lot of fun because a lot more power can go to the rear than the front under those driving conditions, and that really makes this very lively. An awful lot of fun in those conditions. You won't, however, notice that out on your favorite road like this. Even if you're driving it hard, you will mostly notice that the rear end can feel a little bit light. And even though the 0 to 60 is definitely very solid at 6.8 seconds in this model, it doesn't always feel that quick for some reason. This is actually a little bit faster than the last Sportage hybrid that we tested, or Sportage plug-in hybrid, I should say. But oddly enough, that Sportage plug-in hybrid felt faster. I had to do the numbers over and over and over again. This is actually quicker. Just the way that the speed builds just doesn't feel quite the same. This doesn't have the immediacy of acceleration that you'd find in an electric vehicle. So even if I put it over here in power, it starts the engine. I'll actually go put it here in the save mode, so the engine is running now. Floor it. About 20 miles an hour is where we really start to feel the acceleration build. And I think that's why it feels a little bit slower than the numbers would otherwise indicate. But the 60 stopping distance, that's pretty decent considering the weight of this and the fact that it is 3-row. It stopped in about 122 feet, so that's still a pretty solid number. The biggest differentiator between the Outlander plug-in hybrid and the Hyundai and Kia plug-in hybrids is that this feels very much like an EV with a backup plan. Even when the gasoline engine is running, most of the time the electric motors are simply doing the motivation. So in that respect, this really is a dual motor EV that has a generator on board. It will close that clutch and it will drive in parallel hybrid mode, but it's really just at those steady state highway travel speeds. Mountain climbing, city driving, acceleration, etc., it's all going to be a serial hybrid, so it's really just a dual motor EV, again with a generator on board. You'll definitely notice the extra ground clearance and the slightly softer suspension out on rougher road surfaces like this. I think this is a bit more comfortable off the beaten path than the RAV4 Prime, also than the Tucson plug-in hybrid or the Sportage plug-in hybrid. So if you're looking for that comfortable, easygoing vehicle out on the open highway, or if you want to go a little bit further down the trail to get closer to that hiking trail, this is definitely going to be a solid option. And of course, if you plan on taking your plug-in hybrid a little further off the beaten path, this is definitely going to be more capable than the RAV4 Prime. Actually, surprisingly capable. I recently had this at the Northwest Media Association's Mudfest event, and the Outlander plug-in hybrid acquitted itself very, very well. And that's because we have a lot of power for that rear electric motor and the bigger battery pack that's underneath the passenger compartment. The big battery pack means this is far more capable than a regular all-wheel drive hybrid setup. So say a regular RAV4, the reason that feels a little bit more peculiar off-road or in snow, etc., is because it just can't power that rear electric motor without spinning up the front motor. However, in this vehicle and in the RAV4 Prime, they can, because not only do we have a bigger battery pack, but we also have slightly different software control systems that are going to prioritize sending more power to the rear. Perhaps more surprising is that if I put the Outlander in power mode, it's actually going to prioritize sending power to the rear versus power to the front. So it actually becomes a slightly rear power biased dual motor setup. As I've said before, there are pros and cons to every drivetrain design. Clearly, the benefit for this system is its feel, but the downside is fuel economy. And the real-world reality of that is going to differ depending on your particular commute. On my commute, I would still be consuming less gasoline in the Sorento, even though it doesn't have an EV range quite as long as this in the real world, because its fuel economy is notably better. So for the few miles that the gasoline engine does need to turn on, I would be consuming a decent amount less gasoline, so I would be stopping at the gas station even less. But still, 2,500 miles, only 2 trips to the gas station. It says I have 94 miles of total range, but because we've been charging this on each side of the commute every day, that 94 miles of gasoline range is probably going to last us another 2 weeks. And that is, again, the entire reason to get a plug-in hybrid. Be sure and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, because the Outlander plug-in hybrid is going to be with us for at least another 6 months, and we'll be doing continual follow-up videos during our time with this model. And of course, doing some more direct comparisons with the other plug-in hybrids that are available in this segment for North America. Right now, the Outlander plug-in hybrid is kind of an odd duck, because it is certainly smaller and less practical inside for 6 or 7 people than the larger plug-in hybrids. But there aren't very many plug-in hybrids with 3 rows. We have the Pacifica plug-in hybrid minivan. We have the Kia Sorento plug-in hybrid. It only seats 6, not 7. And then we have the Mazda CX-90, which has 8 seats and a plug. So you can actually get that 8 seats or 7 seats in the plug-in hybrid model. Definitely not exactly a competitor to this, but price-wise, it's pretty aggressive. You have some really interesting choices if you want that 3rd row. Now, let's be realistic. The Outlander's 3rd row, it's very, very small. I actually wish there was an option to not have the 3rd row at all. But even in that competitive set where we have the Tucson, the Sportage, the Ford Escape plug-in hybrid, and the RAV4 plug-in hybrid, I think this performs very well. It's definitely more off-road capable than the RAV4 Prime because of the way that it treats that rear electric motor and simply the size of the rear electric motor as well. Unquestionably more capable than the Ford Escape, which is only available in plug-in hybrid format as a front-wheel drive vehicle with a little bit less power realistically than we find in this model, and certainly lower performance than in this model as well. Obviously, the RAV4 Prime is the fastest one, 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds, notably faster than this, but this does have better performance than you find in the Korean twins. If you're currently shopping for an Outlander plug-in hybrid, I think my only word of caution realistically would be the fuel economy and the charge speed. 3.7 kilowatts is a little on the slow side, but again, you will do a complete charge in 6.5 hours if you have the right EVSE. This is a little bit large of a battery pack to really live on a daily basis with just 120 volt charging. It could be done, but you'd need to spend at least 16 hours at home plugged in. So if you're considering one of these, I would suggest stepping up at least into, say, a 15 amp EVSE that operates on 220 volts. Those should be pretty easy to integrate because that's about the kind of power that you have to give a large window air conditioning. So not too hard to integrate into your garage or into your forest charging situation. I actually charge this in my driveway with a really long cable back to the house because it's only charging at 16 amps approximately. Let me know what you think about all that, and of course, stay tuned for future videos. See all of you later.